What is the problem with nominalism? Vienna was a high place in late Middle Age of nominalistic teaching. Nominalism says that God's acting and God's nature are totally separated. What God does in creation, in history, in our lives is purely arbitrary. What he decides in his will. And we cannot conclude from what he does to who he is. The consequence of that attitude is, as the Pope criticizes in Islam, fatalism. God decides, we do not know why, we do not know how, it's his decision. Christian thinking always was, as man is created at God's image, what God is doing with man in the creation and in the redemption, in his acting in history, in our lives, tells us something about God, who he is. We can conclude from his acting to his being. He reveals himself through his acting. He is not an oriental despot hidden behind a curtain, looking at what we do, but not revealing his identity. Nominalism has as a result that religion takes refuge in piety, because the only thing we can do is to have a pious behavior to a God who is absolutely ununderstandable beyond his doing is his ununderstandable being. Pope Benedict goes on saying that modern science is somehow the child of nominalism. It's not easy, that talk in Regensburg, but very substantial. Modern science decides to exclude from its perspective everything that is not measurable. All what is, so to say, metaphysical, beyond measure and experiment, is arbitrary. Your opinion, my opinion. Certainty exists only where you can have measuring, experiment. And that leads to the conclusion that reality and reason have shrinked enormously to only what is measurable. All the rest is arbitrary. What are the consequences of that? We are in the midst of the practical consequences of nominalism and, let's call it, scientism.